Om Asata Ma Sadgamaya Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya Mrityormamritam Gamaya Aviravirmayedhi Rudrayate Dakshinang Mukham Te Nomam Pahi Nityam. Lead us from the unreal to the real. Lead us from darkness unto light. Lead us from death to immortality. Reach us through and through ourselves, and evermore protect us from ignorance by thy sweet compassionate face. My subject this morning is after death, what? Swami Vivekananda often used to say that while a person is young, he is generally an optimist. But when he goes on the other side of youth, he has a tendency to become a pessimist. I imagine preoccupation with the subject of death is somewhat the sign of age. Yet I do not think that that is the only true explanation of our interest in the subject of death. You see, after all, this life, if it is leading anywhere, objectively seen is leading towards that supreme event called death. One cannot deny that. If you say it is neither life nor death, it is some achievement, then achievement of whom? Of a being, of a person. And that person apparently comes to an end with death. It would seem then that all our efforts, all our idealism, all our struggle to realize our ideals, all those things are destined to end in nothingness. Is that the true explanation of our existence? But if we assume that there is a continuity of this life on the other side, that although the body at death remains behind, and the person seems to have become unconnected from his environment in life, yet he continues to be there, bodiless existence, and that existence also has some meaning, then true living would consist in living in such a way that it is in line with the existence on the other side of death. That is to say, through life, through our post-mortem existence, we should follow one goal, one intelligent plan. I therefore oftentimes tell you that unless we understand death, or what happens after death, or what kind of life we live after we depart this life, unless we understand that, we would not know how to live this life. Are we going in the right direction? Are we acquiring things which would survive physical death, or gathering things which will perish as the body perishes? And we find after a long life of 70 or 80 years or 90 years, we have just wasted most of these years and haven't acquired anything which could carry over. One should therefore try to understand death. I do not think that it need necessarily be symptomatic of age. Though I admit that as we grow older, we become wiser. Some of you I know at once are thinking, well, of course, the old man always thinks that. The old man always thinks he's wiser than the young. But I do not believe that it is altogether an explanation. Rather, if we do not become embittered by life, if loss of youth is not also a profound sense of loss altogether, then I think age has an advantage. You have had experience of your young days, you have lived 30, 40 years, say one is still young at 40, and you have this experience, and then as you go on beyond, you can evaluate them, you can see what you have gathered through this youthful existence. And then a true estimate of existence becomes possible. I must not say that in India, in our religious literature or philosophical literature or traditions, too much attention has been given to the question of death. Sometimes the philosophers plainly tell us that life and death or reincarnation and all those other things, and collectively speaking of creation, dissolution and so on and so forth of the universe, all those things are of secondary importance, that these things are dwelt upon in the books or the sages speak about this subject is to show the transitoriness of creation, transitoriness of individual existence, born out of ignorance of truth. And the essential purpose is to impress upon our mind of the immortal, sovereign and eternal character of our own true self. That is what they say, and yet because the literature is so voluminous, and of course this literature has continued uninterrupted for several thousand years, we find here and there scattered, if not essentially treated, all kinds of ideas about life, about death, what death is, what happens after death, where the soul goes, what is nature as it travels from condition to condition. All those things have been dealt with, and various reasons also have been given why those things are reasonable. And it is out of this I would want to tell you a few things. Now at the beginning we could take these attitudes. For example, you could say that there is no such thing as survival of bodily death. Many people find it easy to think in those terms. In other words, they find it is easier not to think than to think. Because if they begin to think, they cannot maintain this attitude that our life is nothing but an aggregate of some material particles, and death is the disintegration of these particles. One cannot think in those terms. One is compelled to think that there is some other reality or being which is not made up of these material particles, but which is indivisible, unchanging, and therefore eternal. And if it is somehow mixed up with this body, which is clearly made up of material things, then when this body disintegrates at death, this one unalterable thing, it passes on, because it could not undergo any change, it could not be destroyed. Now that the modern tendency is not to think of the soul or immortal soul and so on and so forth, is, I am afraid, prompted by the outlook on life which has been created by modern learning. We have discovered so much and so many mysteries in the world in which we live. We have found this body, this mind so complex and so full of profound secrets that these have overwhelmed our sense of knowledge. We do not feel that we have to run after things which are oftentimes questionable and which cannot be proved very much in spite of spiritualism or psychical research and so on and so forth. And we remain contented in explaining everything in terms of the tangible and the visible. In other words, in terms of matter. mind itself has been discovered to be so complex. I have read psychologists who have spoken of the mind in terms which we apply to God himself. And yet they would not try to philosophize. They think that that is against the scientific spirit. They would not say whether the mind survives death. They would not speculate about that because that would be unscientific. And yet they speak of terrible things and tremendous things about this mind. They speak of this mind in terms, as I say, which could not be applied to any visible things, could be applied only to metaphysical realities. That is as regards the mind, and you can well understand wherever learning has gone, wherever knowledge has proved, it has found mystery after mystery, and we have been caught in the profundity of this new knowledge. And this knowledge, unfortunately, has been blinding in its moral and spiritual effect upon us. Nowadays, a sense has dawned that science or modern knowledge, in spite of his extraordinary character, is lacking in something. And I think the general tendency there again is that knowledge and religion should be separated. Religion is a matter of faith, of acceptance of certain values on the basis of faith. They cannot be proved except in their effect. If you have some faith, you feel a certain release of tension within yourself. Life, you find, can be lived in better terms. And you do not have to seek any proof of these articles of faith or articles of belief. If you seek proof, then the field where you should work should not be the field of religion, but it should be the field of matter and of mind. That is to say, of this existence. I wonder if this kind of division in our knowledge can be really a stable arrangement, and would it not happen that again the same question would rise, as it did with the dawn of this modern age, whether there is truth in the spiritual beliefs or not. I am sorry to find, particularly since after the last war, in the Western world there has been a strong tendency of going back to religion in the name of faith and not in the name of proof. I think gradually this emphasis, overemphasis on faith and belief, will become somewhat attenuated by mystical experiences, about which also there has been a growing desire in this part of this world. As many more people will begin to have experiences of these metaphysical truths themselves, certain conclusions, rational conclusions would follow. Just as with the knowledge of physical reality, we are coming to some scientific conclusions, determination of scientific laws. In the same way, after we have had enough experience of metaphysical truths and realities, we shall be able to propound to ourselves truths which cover such experiences. And then we shall find that religion is not really a realm of faith alone, though faith is a wonderful thing. But it is also a matter of proof, a matter of experience and experiment. And then I think we shall not have this division in knowledge which we see so prominent today. Now we believe that this experience of death and after death can be had individually. You of course will at once say, yes, we have it. When we die we shall have it. Well, that's the rub. When we have experiences of death and of conditions after death, we cannot avail of them in our life because life has already been left behind. And while we are living, very few of us are capable of remembering what this previous experience was, so that he could be guided by the knowledge that he received at the time of death or after death. But in one sense you can have these experiences while you are still living. For example, I would say that there are various ways you can have it. One way you can have it is if you could, by some means, bring your own mind in tune with the mind of God. And you must admit that should be possible. If we admit that there is such a thing as the soul, an eternal entity, then by this means, by bringing our mind in line with the infinite mind, we should be able to receive from time to time some messages from the divine mind. I know the experience of a friend of mine who had a similar experience one evening. And it was so startling to him that he oftentimes says that he cannot altogether bring every details into his memory. It was of such an extraordinary nature. Suddenly, as it were, his mind opened up. He was wandering in the evening in the dark in a meadow, being in a sort of contemplative mood. I think that is what made it possible. And suddenly the mind opened up, and he saw before his mind the whole drama of creation expanded. It was as it were somebody was showing a film of what had taken place by which this creation had to come into existence. And he saw all these different steps open before him, one after the other, in quick succession. He saw this indifferentiated Brahman or divinity in which there was no creation. Then he saw a sort of self-division, apparent self-division in this Brahman. And then he saw multiplication or division of God into infinite number of souls on one side and infinite number of forms on another side. And he saw how two sexes have come into existence, male and female, and how then we came down to this present state of things, where there are infinite number of men and infinite number of women, and so on and so forth. He saw the whole thing just clearly demonstrated before his eyes. He had not been thinking of this subject at all, and he returned quickly home in order to write down what he had just experienced. But he told me, as ill luck would have it, a friend came to visit him. Just at the door he met that friend, and of course, being polite, he had to entertain his friend. And by the time the friend had gone, the vivid memory was also gone. The experience was of such an unusual nature, it is no wonder that he was not able to remember everything clearly. But this which I have told you, he always remembered, and he told us that he saw. Suddenly all this enacted before his mind. It was not an act of imagination on his part, because we know when we ourselves imagine things and think things out, how subjective it is. But when something comes without any effort on our part, and it comes as it were from another source, you cannot but be impressed by the unusual nature of that experience. That is one way you can have. And it is in some similar way one also realizes that one is separate from this body. What is death anyhow? Death is, of course, separation from the body, isn't it? If you assume that there is a soul, I shall dwell upon that point later on. If you assume there is a soul, then death, of course, would be separation of the soul from this body. We know that the body is left behind, we see it remaining there, undergoing a certain change, it is true. It doesn't function as a living thing. Nevertheless, same body is there. Something has gone out of this body, a sentient being has gone. And therefore the body does not respond as it used to do while it was living. Now, if death is that, one can realize this death here and now. If one could separate one's own soul from the body, that if even while living, then one would be experiencing what is called death. And here is another way in which we can really know whether this body is the all or whether there is something else than this body. Now I was telling you about this attitude of the materialists. According to them, there is no soul. And when the death comes, this body becomes inert and it gradually begins to disintegrate. And all civilized people have ways and means by which this rather unfortunate situation regarding the body could be remedied by burying or cremating and so on and so forth. Well, those who hold such a belief, I do not think they can live a very intelligent life here. I must, however, correct myself by saying that there are many who are agnostic or who might hold an outright view that there is no such thing as soul. And yet they could be very wonderful people, showing only that philosophy is, after all, is least part of a human personality. A man is always greater, oftentimes greater than the opinions that he expresses himself. A man, when he thinks and argues with you, he might appear as an atheist or agnostic, but when he behaves and lives, you find that he believes in the truth of certain things. I have sometimes told you of a professor of philosophy I had when I studied in college. A very brilliant man. He was a brilliant student in university, and as a professor also was very brilliant. Well, we used to study with him the subject of logic, and he was quite keen about it. So one day, I had gone to visit him in his own home, and he told me, he knew of my religious and spiritual interests. And he said, you know, very kindly he told me, that if I were a student, I would not have any religious interest now. Because I must first of all find out that there is such a thing as God. I must prove it to myself first. Then only I should believe in God. Otherwise, one goes for irrational things. He said, I was very much interested in metaphysics. But I found that first of all I should become well established in logic. Because suppose I come to some conclusion that God exists, how shall I prove that this conclusion is right or wrong? Only logic can teach me how a certain conclusion or conviction is right or wrong, so I am now giving a great deal of attention to logic. And as I was talking, you see, his little boy, he had a little boy and was rather a sickly boy, and I think his parents therefore are very fond of the child. And this child came to the room where we are talking, and the professor of logic forgot all logic. He began to speak in the most affectionate terms to his child, took him up in his arms and began to talk to him baby talks and so on and so forth. Well, I could not but see the contrast between his philosophy and his natural reaction to his own child. He had not proved yet to himself why he should behave so affectionately to his child. I think no parents can ever prove it. No parents can ever prove it. They just say that that's natural. Well, you see, and I, of course, smiled within myself, and being an Oriental, was very respectful to the professor. You see, we are very respectful. We would not dare to point out this kind of self-contradiction on his part, but I smiled. Well, I had always great respect for him, and I cherish a fond memory of this professor. He was very kind to me, and he was a very fine teacher. But there it is. Man is always greater than his opinions. And many people, therefore, who in their philosophical opinions might be materialists or agnostics or atheists and so on, in actuality they are much more than that. I oftentimes, as I pointed out, see in the modern attitude towards life and towards death a similar kind of self-contradiction. They would tell you, oh, there is no such thing as immortality, except what we do for mankind, and that remains in the life of humanity as immortal. Well, now there are several illogics there. First of all, there is no proof that humanity would be immortal if we believe in evolution or similar such things. And in some distant future, humanity might well disappear from the face of the earth. If you say that some other creatures might come, and they would also have some benefit of what mankind had achieved, well, I entertain profound doubt about it. And then there is always the astronomical possibility. This earth might suddenly be swept up by the tail of a comet or some such thing and dashed into smithereens. And what would happen to the humanity then? You contribute to humanity, it is lost. But then this is frivolous, I admit, compared with the other illogic that I at once see. If I as a human being could not have any real purpose, except in terms of other people, then the other people also would not have any purpose except in terms of some other people. See? It is, as it were, saying, my life is meaningless, good and evil or accomplishment do not mean anything to me, because after all I am a bundle of matters, but it will mean something to you. And then when he says that, the other person, I am also a bundle of matter. These things don't matter much to me. See? And so there is this peculiar situation in which people think that what cannot be held true of themselves can be held true of the aggregate of all human beings called humanity. If you say that we actually say it, a good man does some good work, many people benefit from it. Whether he is an agnostic or an atheist, it really doesn't matter. Whether he believed there was a soul or not, it didn't matter. You have to admit he has done some good to others. There it is. His philosophy was lower than his instinct. You see, he has assumed something else. He has assumed that there is such a thing as good to be done to humanity. He might say, I don't care, it is my satisfaction that I do those things for others. But what really, if he had thought about it, would have said, yes, there is such a thing as good. It is good for me and it is good for the others too. And then he would be thoughtful. Then he would have to find out what that good really is. He will not stop with this instinctive idea about good. In this respect, we can learn a supreme lesson from Buddha. As you all know, he did not speak anything about God except saying that he has nothing to say about it. And if people used to press him too hard, he would say, did I say that God did not exist, or did I say that God exists? He was awfully cagey about it. And nor did he say that there was such a thing as soul. He would not say anything about them, and I am inclined to think that he rather would say that they did not exist. Most of the interpreters today think that he did not just want to become involved in metaphysical arguments, having seen amongst his contemporaries how most people are concerned with views, different philosophical views, and did not actually live the life. And therefore he did not want to bring forward these metaphysical questions. He just wanted to tell them something practical. That is the general trend among modern interpreters of Buddha and Buddhism. But that is not so. That's not so. Buddha also indulged in metaphysical arguments. They may not have been of very profound nature. He did not go too much into it. But, you see, he found, his attitude was that one has to experience these things. And then he showed the practical means by which this experience could be had. And one thing that troubled him was whether soul existed or didn't exist. There was tremendous suffering. You will find there is a similar self-contradiction also in the modern man. He does not believe in soul, but he feels concerned about human welfare. Buddha had that attitude too. Otherwise you would say, if soul did not exist, nothing existed, about whom was he so busy? Whose misery was he concerned about? But Buddha was a little deeper than the modern man. Buddha believed that there was such a thing as reincarnation or continuity of existence. He didn't say whose reincarnation and whose continuity of existence. He admitted that there is a false belief in the existence of the soul. Until one was illumined, one did have that false belief. And of course suffering was there. That was a matter of experience. It was not a matter of speculation. And he had a great sympathy for all suffering beings. And he wanted to find a way out, and there he differed from the modern man. He wanted to go to the very source of this evil, this suffering, in all forms. He wanted to find the ultimate origin, and then he wanted to find if there was any remedy for it. And you know how, out of this inquiry, he attained to what he called Nirvana or illumination. Bodhi, also it is spoken of. And there he found the answer to all these problems which have plagued him for many years. He found that all life was sorrow. This sorrow had a beginning. He found the beginning of sorrow. And he also saw the end of sorrow in his own experience. And then he also found the ways and means by which the sorrow can be ended. And when he found those things, he came out and taught his eightfold path. See? And he said, this is good in the beginning, this is good in the middle, this is good in the end. Now modern man doesn't want to do it. And if you do it, he would find that he cannot become an agnostic or an atheist as he is now. That the problem of this life cannot be solved without a grasp of the problem of the other lives. You have to have the complete picture of existence. You have the complete picture of the human person from the beginning to the end, and then only everything can be rightly done. You could have right belief, right attitude towards life. You would make the right kind of effort. Otherwise you will find many of those things that you do, these are only governed by your instincts and custom. And many of those things do not have any meaning. This is the greatest tragedy of our life, that we give so much of our heart, so much of our strength, to do things which really are of little avail, either to ourselves or to others. You take your whole day, and you count the hours that you spend in pursuit of things, and you will be surprised to find a great percentage of the things which you do are neither good, are not good either for yourself or for others. So much is wasted. Somehow instinct tells us that's the right thing to do. Instinctively we go on doing those things, and instinct becomes our God and our guide. And of course then all instincts are not right, and therefore we are misled. If we knew what we are going to experience after death, it would be a wonderful thing. Now if you assume that there is a soul, you could also have different attitudes about it. Some religions have taught, as in almost all religions have taught this view, that the ultimate destiny of the soul is to go and live in a blessed region, where there is no sorrow, no death, no decay, no disease, nothing. And there you live in infinite happiness from eternity to eternity. In some religions, this idea has been modified. For example, in Hinduism and Buddhism, this idea has been modified. They have admitted that there are such realms called heavens, but you do not stay there eternally. Those things also are found to be mortal. And in very ancient time, even in the early days of the Vedas, there are many people who began to question the idea of heaven as the ultimate destiny of the soul. They found that could not be. Heaven also came to an end. And anyhow, the souls also are compelled to leave heavens, and so they could not believe that that could be the end of the human soul. Then came a great deal of this philosophical inquiry, asking of questions, and just as Buddha, in the later days, in order to find these questions, he began to plunge deep into his own life, deeper and deeper went into the recesses of his own being. And there, in the profoundest state of meditation, he came upon the truth. In those earlier days, there are thousands of men and women in India. They are called rishis, the sages, who also plunge deeply into themselves, because that is the only place where you can plunge. You cannot plunge into somebody else or something else. You will just knock your head out. So they plunged, went deeper and deeper within themselves, and they found the true nature of the problems and also true answers to those problems. And those things, when those truths were found, they were embodied in those texts which are called the Upanishads. Of course, no writing was known in those days. These things are composed, and these things are memorized and handed down from generation to generation until writing became known, and these are set down in paper. Well, until then, these are oral traditions, and they had to be heard from the lips of the teachers, and therefore they are called Shrutis, that is, the things heard. And those things gave another answer to the destiny of the soul. The soul did not go anywhere, did not come from anywhere, did not live anywhere. And then you might say, then what happened? If all these things are negated, then what do you say of the soul in its ultimate state? But the ultimate state, the infinite, could not be spoken of as a place where it dwells, could not be spoken of as going from one place to the other. See, this whole idea was repudiated. You see what it is? The original idea in all the religions and in many religions today is to think of the state of the soul as separated from the body, as belonging to a certain plane of existence, just as we live in this earthly plane now. Ultimate condition is only a refurbishing of our earthly condition. A little more glorification, and that's all. Here we have blessed days, happiness, but they get mixed up with unfortunate days too, and also with misery. But in heaven, in that ultimate state, we shall have unalloyed happiness, and that's all the difference. There is perpetual sunshine, literally, and also metaphorically. And here is death and there is no death. But here is a body, there also will be body. Here the body decays, there the body would not decay. Here the body is not always nice to look at, there every body is considered to be nice to look at. Except for these little modifications, most people think of this ultimate destiny in terms of this existence. Only, as I said, the Buddhists, when they speak of Nirvana as the ultimate aim of the soul, every soul is destined to enter into the state of Nirvana at one time or another. And Nirvana is an extreme state, and described in the most extreme terms. Literally speaking, it is called extinction. Nirvana is annihilation or extinction. That's the literal meaning of that word. And of course that has been very frightening to many people. But I think a right interpretation of this, that everything that we considered as existent or real become extinct. We consider this phenomenal reality to be real, that will become extinct. But that other thing which never is caught in forms, never finds manifestation in our world or time and space, that thing remains, and it is that which is apprehended in the state of Nirvana. That's the general idea. Now here again is the description of the ultimate state in terms which we cannot even grasp here, but to speak of finding it similar to our earthly existence. Now if that is the ultimate destiny of the soul, you will understand how we should live this life. And some idea of our true nature is had when death comes. Death, I told you a little while ago, that spiritual growth is a sort of dying process. When you sit calmly and quietly in meditation and in prayer, you close your eyes, you do not want to hear anything, do not want to experience anything else, you want to concentrate your whole heart and soul on God. Isn't it actually assuming the posture of death? In death you do not hear, you do not see, you do not move, you do not talk, you are not aware of external existence. But maybe the inner consciousness remains. Of course, death seen from the outside does not disclose that there is still an inner consciousness. In meditation we become aware of this. But externally speaking, it is death. When one reaches the very height of meditative state, the greatest height, the body actually assumes all the symptoms of death. Shri Ramakrishna, when he would enter into those states, he would evince all the signs of physical death. There are some doctors who occasionally tested him. They found pulse beat was gone, no heartbeat at all. Sometimes body will become cold as in death. There was no sign of life anywhere in this body. And that is an extreme state of meditation, so it is not just merely a superficial similarity which I am pointing out to you. Let me here put our position in rather stark terms, and some of you I know would not like that kind of thing. Like or not, you are going to have it. Well, you know, certain things are inevitable. So most people don't like death, but they die, they have to. Many things we don't like, but we have to lump them and help about it. Well, you see, we just say this, that to live as we do, in terms of this body, in terms even of the mind, in terms of this external universe, in terms of our fellow beings and so on, are all things, are parts of our prison existence, as it were. All these things have proceeded from the ignorance of our own true nature and the nature of reality, nature of other people as well as nature of the inanimate existence. The plain fact of the matter is, if I think of one individual, the individual, truly the person, as we say in Sanskrit, Purusha. Purusha means person. And I think the idea, the word person conveys the true idea than if I just see soul or so on and so forth. The person is one who is self-conscious. Person who has a sense of value. Person is the one who lives in terms of the real. That's the person. Well, now, this true person is separate and different from this body and this mind. And this person is perfect in himself. He doesn't need anything. If you say that you mean to say that a person has to remain isolated from the rest of reality? No, of course not. The person is all of reality. And if some of you dispute this idea, claiming that you also are some reality, and you are outside of this person, then the answer to that is, when a person knows himself, he finds himself at one with all the other persons. If all were to know their true condition, they would find they are all one. Each feels himself to be the center of this self-consciousness, but at the same time he feels himself one with all the rest of this self-conscious being. That's the ultimate state of the Purusha, of the person. If you say, then there is not much fun. If I am one with all, there is not much fun in that existence. A great deal of the charm of existence is we know one another, we enjoy one another, but how could you do it if you are not separate from one another? Oh no, that's the only beginning of enjoyment and understanding. True enjoyment and understanding comes when the sense of unity with all becomes established. It does not have to be established, it is there already, it has to be discovered. It is discovered when the person becomes separated from the body and the mind. That's the plain fact of the matter. We have forgotten this fact that we are different from the body and the mind. As a matter of fact, they are completely opposed to the nature of the person who is spirit. And it takes a long, long time before we are able to convince ourselves of this fact. It is maintained that this sense never comes to one with conviction until he has done with this world of shadows, until he has become disillusioned. There is a song of which a line is, "Oh, the miserable bee, it has lost itself in a painted lotus, trying to sip honey." We are those miserable bees. We think this is real. Three-dimensional reality, just as we are three-dimensional. Reality in our present state is nothing but three-dimensional matter. That's the standard of reality here. And our body is three-dimensional, and whatever is three-dimensional is real to us. Actually speaking, everything is two-dimensional. Like a picture. When your mind becomes calm, then you will begin to see, whichever you look, you will find everything is two-dimensional, as painted on a canvas. You actually perceive it. Swami Vivekananda, in a letter to an American disciple, he was writing from Paris, and he said, "As I am writing to you, I look and I find the whole universe like pictures hanging in the wall of a room." It is a well-known thing that one experiences that. And of course you see, when you begin to have a little of that sense, that is, you do not crave anything in this world, and the world loses its false nature, its real nature, then you have this conviction of which I was speaking, not until then. Then some of you might say, we shall wait until then. Why bother ourselves? We shall wait until then. Well, there is the trouble. You see, this way of living, our present uninformed way of living, is so full of suffering, and what is more, is so degrading. So degrading that very soon a person with self-respect refuses to live this life. And that is the trouble here. You cannot wait for it, so you begin to prod yourself. How you can get out of these states, and you try to find if there is not something truer, more real. Well, however, in one form or another, to self-effort, or naturally, some such experience is to come, and then this world appears as unreal. Then you become conscious of this other thing. The spirit is the all. The person is everything that he wants. In the world of matter and mind, there is nothing to be achieved. So how can the ultimate condition of the person be thought in terms of time and space or phenomenal existence? It could not be. And so life is lived in different terms when that understanding comes here. You do not seek and you do not go after things which are transient, which are today and tomorrow goes, which does not bring about the clear knowledge of your own true self, but only clouds the vision of it, or whatever vision you have. You avoid all those things. Life becomes one of renunciation, then of acquisition, of service, then self-service, and life becomes one for the quest of this eternal knowledge, not quest for this knowledge of relative reality. Whole picture changes. Well, in this very life then, one dies and one attains this other life. That is what is called meditation. Meditation should always be accompanied and preceded by what is called dissipation. You no longer are attached to these things, covered by those things. You are free and detached. And then you become aware of spiritual reality. Call him God and call him your own personality. Call him your own self. It doesn't matter what term you apply to it. It is eternal and it is infinite, perfect in nature. And then you plunge into it. And more you become separated from this body. More and more. I told you that our philosophers did not directly deal with these subjects much. Occasionally they have, and when they have done, they have not always answered the questions which we are interested to have answered. Yeah? You see, for example, there is that very famous text called the Katha Upanishad. It is very well known to you. How a little boy went to the house of death and waited 3 days. Death had gone away somewhere on an errand. Well, death must be pretty busy anyhow, the god of death. And when he returned after 3 days, an attendant told him that there is a guest there. For 3 days he had been waiting unentertained. He is like a fire. Just as a fire destroys everything, a guest unentertained also destroys the good works, the good merits of the host. And you better do something about it. Well, God of that hurried to this little guest. He was an 8-year-old boy. And he said, please forgive me, I have been away. But I shall grant you in compensation 3 boons. You asked me 3 boons for the 3 days of non-entertainment, of neglect. So the boy asked me, being a little boy, he said, well, when I return to the earth, may my father recognize me. So the death said, yes, he would recognize me. Then the boy asked about the mystery of a certain Vedic ritual. And the god of death described how that ritual is to be performed, how the altar has to be made, how the fire is to be lighted, and so on and so forth. Well, unfortunately, we do not know anything about it. Evidently, it is one of those things which have been lost. There is no other reference of this particular ceremony in our literature. The third question was, of course, a real question. The boy said, On earth there is a dispute amongst men whether there is a survival of death or not. I would like from you, whether with death everything dies or the soul survives. There is such a thing as a soul which survives. And of course God of death would not answer. You don't ask me that question. And it's a profound truth, and I would rather not ask you question. I would give you a long, long life, a very large kingdom on earth, many beautiful wives and many cattle and horses and all so on. And so the boy says, oh no, I am not interested in those. I am not interested in your song and dance. You keep your horses, tavaiva vaha tavan vikta gite. You keep your horses, you keep your song and dance. I don't want that. And that pleased Death. He said, that's wonderful. You are the right person to receive this knowledge, because the receiver of this knowledge must be Ashcharya Vakta Kusalishya Labhata. He must be well fitted. And the speaker of this mystery also must be very skillful. Kusala must be well skilled in this knowledge, well established this knowledge. And then he gave a most beautiful discourse about the nature of the self. This self which does not belong to the body or to the mind, which nothing can touch, which nothing can change, which is perfect in itself, fulfilled in itself. And this is the answer he gave. Now when we think of men in terms of his body and his mind. We think of him as a psychophysical entity. In your Western tradition, even philosophic tradition, you have not yet learned to distinguish between the spirit, the real person, and the mind. Mind and soul are identical. It used to shock me so much when I started studying Western philosophy in college. Mind and soul same. You sometimes find in Christian theology, they make a little distinction between the spirit and the soul. But that is not too much of a distinction. But however, that's a welcome distinction. The soul is generally a mixture of what we would understand to be spirit and mind. Good mind, bad mind, all things taken together is the soul. Sometimes in our translation, we use the word soul to indicate the spirit, and not as it is understood generally in Christian theology or in Western languages. But why is it that distinction was not made? Still you think in terms of mind, because you see, you have figured out that in the ultimate state also the same thing will remain. The body will be there, the mind will be there, the soul will be there. All would be there. The body is exceedingly precious. Ordinary experience shows that if a person loses his body or the body is damaged, then he cannot function like a normal man. He cannot see, cannot hear, something happens to his brain, he cannot think. From that they have concluded that the soul is dependent upon this body, dependent upon the senses, dependent upon the mind to behave like a rational creature. And after a lot of fumbling, Christian theology, I should mention specifically the Catholic, Roman Catholic theology, they just went after that Aristotelian view of things. And they still believe, even in the ultimate state, one has to have intelligence and mind and reason and senses and body and all these things, otherwise he is not a perfect being, even in the ultimate state. And therefore, whenever you look at people, you just think this body is there. I myself do not see, and I do not think you also see, how when at death the soul becomes separated from the body and the body is put buried underground, and we all know that it crumbles to dust, how that becomes the part of an ultimate existence. That which can be separate, it is separable, and therefore it is not an integral part, essential part of a being. If you can separate the body from yourself, then you have to admit that body is not a part of yourself. Won't you? Well, of course, you might say, well, I think that I am what I am, including my body in it. Now, how can I say when body is separated, I am not separated, a part of me is not separated? It is a sort of vicious circle. Our ignorance prompts a certain estimate of our own self. And because we think of ourselves in certain terms, our procedure of knowledge also is governed by those preconceptions. But that's not true. Let us proceed about it in a common sense way, which is also, of course, a rational way. We know at death, we who observe the death of another person, we find his body, after having gone through some agonies or some state of unconsciousness, gradually is deprived of the conscious being, or consciousness, you might say. Senses do not respond to anything. You talk, there is no response, it cannot move. And of course, certain physiological changes have been taking place, by which these cells would eventually die. Some have already died, others will die in a short while. And then, of course, the whole thing will become unbearable, and that is why you very soon, in 2 or 3 days, you bury it or cremate it, get rid of it. Finished. That's death. Death objectively. That's a false picture of death, or rather a very superficial picture of death. That sum total of experience is the experience of the beholders of death, not of the dying person. And that's, of course, you can well imagine, would give you a very false picture. One doesn't know, however, what the dying person feels, except in what I told you some time ago, that what you don't experience now, in some heightened state you could experience, you could know it. You try to separate yourself from your own body, say in meditation. You suppose you experiment upon it. That is death, as I have shown. Separation from the body, senses gradually become unresponsive to stimuli. Mind does not go out. People talk to you, you do not hear. They touch you, you do not respond, you don't feel. And what is that process? How do you accomplish this state, achieve that state? It takes years and years of effort. And it is, of course, a heart-breaking effort, full of agonies. Do you think it is easy to become separated from the body in meditation? To be separated from the body, one has told to be separated from outside things. My ears would hear any sound. Somebody approaching me, I would hear the footfalls. Because I am interested in the others. I am interested in the coming and going of others. And my eyes, although they might be hidden under the lids, nevertheless, they are inclined to open up if something unusual was imminent. Many of these senses remain alert. It is only gradually, with great effort, giving up things which are dearest to you, and most valuable to you, that gradually you find the senses have been brought under control, and then you find that even if somebody comes and touches your body, you do not feel it. You have become separated from it. At death, exactly the same thing happens to a person dying. All peoples in the world, they have wanted that people should live to a long age. They should not die prematurely. I often used to wonder why people want to live so long on earth. After all, after some years, existence becomes, all teeth fall off. You cannot eat well, you cannot sleep well, you cannot move well, you do not hear well. All these senses become disabled. People no longer care for you. It is as it were. The river used to flow along a channel, and now it has gone along a new channel, many miles off from where you are sitting high and dry on the bank of this dry river. Life flows away from you. And why should a person live so long on earth? And people are so busy to make people live long and long and long and long. Doctors have a mania of keeping a person alive, you see, by injecting, by putting under them under 10s, by giving them this medicine, that medicine. I don't know why they do it. Except there is one justification. I think there is something is knowing how miserable this body could become. That certainly is an experience worth having. Sometimes we learn from others' experience, but it is not often that we do so. And then we have to have our experiences of our own. And of course, you see, when we live, say, to 80s and so on and so forth, we go through the total experience of physical existence. And they say, so far as death is concerned, they say that some illness, some disabilities of age are a helpful thing in dying. One already turns away from physical existence. Mind has turned away a little. Mind has deepened a little, begins to reach towards something else which is not of this life, apparently anyhow. And that deepening condition is helpful for the soul to depart. When you no longer like this body to be in, and you no longer like the things which you had experienced to this body, and you are eager for spiritual experience, it has become easier for you to pass this life. That is the one benefit I see of living, you see, too long on this earth. Well, anyhow, I know there are differences of opinion at this point. And so when death comes, you see, if a person's mind has been withdrawn a little, then it becomes easy for that soul to pass out. Body is not holding it down. It also is not grasping at the body which is about to lose. It becomes easy. But it has been said that if they have too much worldly attachment, too many worldly desires unfulfilled, then however old a person is, his death is miserable. Sometimes we see the misery of the departing soul in its appearance. Sometimes, even though outwardly it might be very peaceful, there is no knowing what the soul felt when it passed on. Sometimes it so happens that the body is incapable of registering what is taking place in the mind. If my face were to become paralyzed, whatever emotions I might have, they would not be registered in the face. Sometimes before death that connection is cut off, and therefore whatever the soul might feel would not register in the appearance. So that to think, oh, he passed very peacefully, well, outwardly speaking you might say that, but you do not know actually what the inner condition of the soul was. There is a great struggle there. These are the things they say that happens. I think I should tell you that according to the Hindus, unless a soul has attained to perfection here already, the soul, by the word soul I am really meaning spirit, that which is different from the body and the mind and separate from it. Well, unless the soul has realized itself here, then it becomes accompanied by the mind. Otherwise the soul goes out, leaving the body and the mind behind. Body we see, of course, a disintegrating, and we know that feature of death. Of mind we do not know, except we find there is no function of the mind in the dead body. And of course, if you are a materialist, you say that is what is to be expected. Mind, after all, is an after effect of the body, and if the body is disintegrating, mind also disintegrates. Just as flame comes out of the wood, burning wood. If you remove the wood, the flame also goes away. And many people think, therefore, the mind also disappears when the body begins to disintegrate. Now, we won't discuss that aspect of the question, the materialistic aspect. We shall just, we have been discussing the position of those who believe that there is such a thing as soul separate from the body, an immortal something. Well, now then we say that as long as there is ignorance, the mind is, as it were, mixed up with the soul, just as we feel in our present state. But when a person has attained to this state of illumination, then he realizes that he is also separate from the mind, even here, even while living. And such a person is called Jivan Mukta. That is to say, liberated, free, even while living in this body and in this mind. He is free. He realizes that he is not mixed up with the mind and the body. So when death comes, body of course dies and mind just disappears. Mind has no longer any function, just disappears. And if you think, then the soul becomes an idiot. If he doesn't have any mind to think with, oh no, he does not have anything to think about. It is so perfect that he does not have to think about it. To have a mind is an inconvenience, as everybody knows. See? Sometimes it gives you some pleasure, but more often than not, it is an inconvenience, and therefore half of the day we have to remain mindless, which is called sleep. And in that we find our comfort and our relief. Well, mind is not necessary anymore. Either the mind disappears, or mind disappears into the self, or mind just disappears, and the pure spirit goes away. Well, of course, the number of such people dying is so small that we could not speak these conditions as general. But there are some such deaths you witness. And this is an extraordinary experience to witness the death of a person who had already realized that he is free from the body and free from the mind, and he is the pure spirit, one with God. It's an extraordinary thing. Well, however, we won't talk about it, because their number is too small, and they do not have any practical application on the average life. The average person goes out with this mind. The mind remains with the spirit or the soul, if you allow me to use this term loosely, until the state of perfection or perfect illumination is reached. Until then, the mind will remain mixed up with the soul, and the soul will think in terms of the mind. And mind itself will seek a body. So it is said that at that time, although it is deprived of the physical body, and it is a great agony to be deprived from the physical body, and also from one's own relatives, from one's own possessions, from one's own environment in which he has functioned and found have some happiness, sorrows he oftentimes forgets and remembers his happinesses, and he finds it very difficult to get away, and that's one of the terrible agonies of the dying soul. Another agony there is, they say that at the time of death, all the previous experiences of this life flash forth before the eye of the soul. It is a well-known fact that drowning people have some such experiences, and they feel that they're about to die, suffocated to death, and they begin to see all their past just unfold before their eyes in quick succession like a film. The Hindus believe that it happens to every dying soul. All previous experiences of this life unfold before the eyes. Well, there is no wonder at it. You see, experiences, just because we have forgotten them and they have passed, do not become non-existent, they do not become nothing. That they are something is proved by the fact that it is our experiences which are continually molding our mind and even our body from day to day. And therefore they must remain as a potent force somewhere. Otherwise, whatever experiences you have, for the living moment of that experience, there might be some effect in you, but the moment that moment is gone, the effect also would go away. But that is not what it is. Every experience leaves its mark upon us, and when we say leaves its mark, we should be a little more precise. We should say that every experience becomes an unit of energy working in our own life. And modern psychologists will continually tell you that mind is dynamic. It is a power, full of power, and that is why you find you have some unhappy experience and it just twists your whole life afterwards. It must have tremendous power, that experience, and it is not a living experience, the memory of an experience, to be working in your life with such force. So there are some power units, as it were, units of psychic energies which begin to continually work within yourself, and if you are departing this body, and these experiences belong to you, and as I told you, the mind goes with the soul until the soul has realized its own true nature. then you have to vacate along with this powerhouse which you have built up. You have to take them out. You have put all these units here, there, and so on. You have to now take them out again. You have to vacate this house, and although you put them away in some inaccessible places, now you have to find them out. And so you become aware of their existence. As I oftentimes say, if a man has lived in a house, say, for 30, 40 years, he needs to vacate it. And then he has to take things from the basement and take things from the attic. He is astonished to see all the things he had put them away there. He has forgotten that he ever had these and he ever put them away there. But nevertheless, he has to take them out. The owner of the house says, now you must take every stick out of this place. Clean it out for him. So you have to clean it out. What is the wonder that you will begin to see all these experiences before you? I think that's just a reasonable thing. Now there is an agony in that. If the experiences are of essentially spiritual character, then there is happiness. They tend to make your departure a happy thing. But if they are of worldly nature, then you see many wrong things you have done, many things which you ought to have held on but did not. They have slipped from your hands. They bring regrets to you. Regrets, remorse, all kinds of things overwhelm this departing soul. Some of them raise all kinds of longing for them again. Others repulsion. Others with great anger. When you remember an enemy, you may have forgotten for some years, now they all come back. That's a very ticklish moment for the soul. Very ticklish moment. The Hindu belief is that, they believe in reincarnation, that is rebirth. The soul, after remaining in another world for some time, becomes again incarnated on an earthly plane. Maybe this earth or maybe some other earth. Nowadays they are speaking, there are being many such planets possible where there is life, and maybe there are similar existences as our earthly existence. Well, whatever that might be, you see, the soul is reborn into some such existence. That's the Hindu belief. And how would the soul be reborn, under what conditions? They say is determined at the dying moment, at the previous dying moment. Just imagine this. What is the interval between the death and the next birth? It may be sometimes thousands and thousands of years in our sense of time. And yet, the actual form of rebirth is determined at the dying moment. And how is it determined? It is said that all these previous memories, as they come before the eyes, also forces upon the soul a sort of choice. Just as if you are removing all your furniture of current use or things put away somewhere, you are removing them, then you make a choice which one you want to keep for the next house. And you will say, I think I shall put this away, although I've been using now, I won't use it in the living room anymore. We shall put it away in the storage. And we shall use this. A little repair would be necessary. And you make some choice. And the choice is, of course, made by your condition of the mind. If, for example, there has been a great regret for something, that regret will seek to remedy itself. You have longed for something, you have not attained it in this life, that longing has still remained strong. That will determine what we are going to do. And as I say, and of course you see these are so speculative that I would want you to take those things with a grain of salt. Not that this would be necessarily wrong, but I would not want you to accept them as gospel truth. Of course I believe there is truth in that, but then I was born in that faith, and I am conditioned by that faith. And I would honestly tell you that you should examine all those things, how far truth is there. They say that just as the tendencies, some tendencies predominate over the other tendencies and take the forefront, they also raise in your mind images of forms of existence in which these longings should become fulfilled. Just suppose a man is a poor man and he dreams of enormous riches. He thinks of wealth in abstract terms only. He sees himself as dressed in wonderful clothes, living in a palace. All the picture of the palace and clothes and his behavior and his talk, all those things rise in his mind in forms of images. I mean, our abstract thought oftentimes takes the form of concrete images, and it is said that the dying time, these images float up, and this image is the image of the next birth. And that is what will dominate the soul through the intervening period, and eventually make the soul to be born in that form. What a complex process. One doesn't have peace even in dying. You have to go through all this rigmarole even when you are dying. Well, then, if a soul has been very worldly, as I have already told you, that it finds it very difficult to wrench itself away from this physical existence, the agony of this separation, it as it were makes the soul unconscious. It goes into a sort of fainting fit after it dies. It loses clarity of consciousness. And it is said that the greater is the agony, the longer is the time for recovery from this state of unconsciousness. It's a very unfortunate state of things. You see, the worldly man's destiny is awful. In that respect, our religion is somewhat old-fashioned. You see, new-fashioned religion makes everything is just light and sweetness and music and so on. The idea is you die from this life and at once sprout wings, golden wings, and fly off. See, no. That would be a false picture, and that has the terrible effect of weakening ourselves. If you want to hunt the lion, do you think you can afford to grow up a coward? No. You have to be a strong person. If you want to conquer the problems of existence, deep-seated problems, then you have to be strong. Strong enough to look good and evil in the face, happiness and misery in the face, without flinching. Not becoming hardened. No. Strength is not hard-heartedness. But nor is it faint-heartedness. So this is not so bad. These are the facts which one has to accept. And so this soul, you see, worldly person does not want to get away, he is forced to get out. A great suffering, and the suffering makes this soul as it were fainted. They say that there is, when it first regains consciousness, such a soul, it finds itself floating in a sort of smoky region, somewhat like, I imagine, Los Angeles smoke. I hope there is no Los Angeles man here. That actually said it. See, they say that region is smoky region. And it cannot stand still anywhere, it finds itself floating, as it is having any power of self-determination. Nirashraya, Vayu Bhuta Nirashraya. Nirashraya does not have any fixed place where he says that here is my home now. It doesn't have that consciousness. Gradually, however, some such consciousness develops in the soul. After it has gone through it, the Hindus believe in hell too, but temporary hells. They live in heaven, but temporary heavens. The ultimate destiny of the soul, for every soul, is the state of illumination. So there is no question of eternal hellfire there. But hell, an unpleasant place, they admit there is such a thing as an unpleasant place. If some person has been addicted in this life to all kinds of evil doing, then they say that person gradually is sucked into a still darker region from that smoky region in which the soul was moving around in a state of unconsciousness floating there, is sucked into a dark region, and there is a great deal of suffering for the soul. But if the soul has lived a pretty good life, yes, there has been some, it is a mixture of good and evil. evil, then that soul goes to a higher region, generally called the world of the ancestors. And there the soul will live there in conditions more pleasant than here. But the Hindus all maintain that in those worlds you cannot make any further progress. You only make compensation or receive reward. Either you go to a dark region where you suffer, pay as it were a sort of penalty, or you go to a higher world where you have as it were reward for the good things that you have done. Reward has nothing to do with spirituality. This is all spoken of worldly people here, those who haven't got any spirituality yet. But there are some good worldly people, they are honest people, they are helpful to others, they live decent life. They say that they go to those worlds, you may call that a sort of heaven. Their life is much better, and they are this soul which has gone out without any physical body, is endowed by a sort of body which you might call physical, but not in our sense. Here we are made up of these three entities: a physical body, a subtle body which is made up of the mind, and the causal body which is made up of the higher mind. And these three bodies the soul has. The two bodies, the causal body and the subtle body, which are both are made up of the mind, that always remains with the soul until the soul has reached its highest state. But the physical body is left behind. But there, instead of the physical body, another body comes into existence, which is, of course, in consonance with the world where the soul finds itself now to be stationed. And there it thinks of its past experiences. They, as it were, regain their lost bearing, the souls. The souls have a better sense of what reality should be. They find all the wealth and these things they accumulated here have been a wasted labor, except when they have used these means for the good of others. They find that all this seeking for name and fame and all those things have been a wasted labor, except those things which have come out indirectly because of their living an exalted life. All this searching for wives and children and husbands and all these things have been a wasted labor, except where they have risen above the attachment of the flesh, and they have been able to help their relatives, really help their relatives. Most of the helps are not real help at all. Parents are always heaping things upon the children, and parents think, oh, what a wonderful life I am living. I don't care for anything. I want to do all these things for my children, and I want to do for my wife, and for my this and for my that. I myself don't care anything. The fool doesn't know that he is doing all these things because he has identified himself with his wife and his children. If he had not identified, he would not spend one single cent on the woman or her children. And it is continually demonstrated. He marries, he sees all the beauties of heaven there, and vows eternal trust and love. In 6 months they are separated. You see? And then they fight in the court whether they will give $25 alimony or $2,500 alimony. And if he can get away with a single cent less, he will try his utmost to do that. And do you think that when they pour everything at the feet of that wife and children like this, that you think that there is anything exalted about it? No. But if the same parents can think of the higher good of the children, recognize them as something more than their children. You may say, this is my child, and when you say this is my daughter, this is my son, all that you are saying, that is a lump of flesh and she is a lump of flesh, because that is all you contributed. Did you contribute the mind? No. Did you contribute the soul, which the true person is? No. How can you call that person your son and your daughter unless you are an utter fool? So those who call their children, they are strengthening their sense of bondage. But if they call children of God, entrusted to them by God to serve them, then they are truer. And there have been some parents who have taken that attitude towards their children, and such service to the children or to the wife or to the husband will be conducive to the higher existence, not otherwise. Many of the things which world prize are found to be worthless they are, and therefore a sort of correction comes. It is that period where a person has come away from his field of activity and passes in review the preceding hours and discovers what things have been wrongly done, what has been left undone, how things should be done next day to be done better, and so on and so forth. And this condition comes to the soul, and gradually the force which created his higher existence becomes exhausted. Because everything after all, every cause must be an unit of energy. You have to admit this. The cause is a certain power which produces the effect. When that power becomes exhausted, the effect also comes to non-existence, disappears. It could not exist anymore. Now I am speaking to you. I know I tire you out, but I also would be tired out if the energy that I have in me becomes exhausted. Then I would like to speak and words won't come. At first hoarsely, and afterwards words would get mixed up, thought would not come, energy has been exhausted. Similarly, therefore, if a soul goes to a certain world, it is because there is a propulsion of certain energies, which energies are really nothing but good experiences. And when these become exhausted, then it is found that period of existence also comes to an end. And then the soul begins to feel the pull of reincarnation, of rebirth. And I have already told you where the soul goes, that memory, that image that is made of its future existence, it now becomes revived. And the soul gravitates towards that kind of existence. Well, the Hindus believe that it is not the soul always finds the opportunity of being reborn. You know, of ignorance there are many miseries. But that's nothing very wise to say, everybody knows it. It is misery in dying, it is misery in being reborn. It is not that you always find places like that where you can be reborn according to your preconceptions. You have to have just so parents, just so circumstances, and then you can be born there. If those things are not there, you can just wait. And wait a long time, and they say it is a terrible agony for the soul, which wants to be reborn and hasn't any opportunity to be reborn. You will no doubt have heard how the Hindus say they are very eager to have sons. And if a person dies without a son, he considers it a great misery and misfortune. And why should he not? Since he remembers, after all, children have to be, what about daughters? Yes, daughters there are. Second best, yes. Don't be angry. You see, you know, a patriarchal system has existed for such a long time. For stability of a family and stability of a community, it is men whom you want more than women. If you are to refer to matriarchal system, it would have been different. In some certain parts of India, they have that system. They have that system in Travancore and Cochin. Though it created so many problems, gradually they are changing it too. In Tibet also they have some sort. But they say, at one time that was the condition more prevalent. Then somehow it could not survive. And it was replaced by the present system in which man is the head of the family and not the woman. And having accepted that fact, because that's part of the fact, undeniable fact, you admit that if families are to continue, or communities to continue, family traditions to continue, culture to continue, the family should have in every generation at least one man born. And Hindus always felt that if they marry, then it is their duty to leave children behind. Because only then opportunities for these other souls to be reborn become perpetuated. If they just marry and do not have any children, then how will those souls which are waiting to be reborn, how will they find any opportunity? Tell me this. You might say that Hindus might well think of this life and not think of the other life so much. Well, now if you know about the conditions in other life, you have to pay some attention to those things. The only thing, if you are married, then they have laughed at that idea. Miss Mayo wrote a book, and he said that Hindus are so full of sex that even the little girls they worship God in order to beget children. What a horrible mind, what a dirty mind to have. with which to study another people. Why should not, when a girl knows that she is going to be married, she has grown up, she has entered adolescence, she knows that eventually she will be given in marriage, then if she wants to be the right wife and right mother, she cannot just be a beautiful, sleek animal, glamorous. She would not make a right kind of mother, a right kind of wife. She has to put some spirituality into that thing. She has to feel the station of a wife is a dignified station and not merely animal mating. Something has to be put there, so that when the child is born, it is not just born, it is just surrounded by animal impulses and instincts. What kind of soul would be drawn to such parents? And therefore you will find they surround the matter of birth with all kinds of religious austerities. All kinds of religious austerities. And only then that relationship, conjugal relationship, becomes fruitful. Only then children born of such marriage are good children. Good children are drawn to such parents. And a nation cannot thrive unless there are very fine marriages of this idealistic nature. You have to assure those things. Now Hindus have been conscious of this fact, and therefore every system, every institution has become somehow inspired by the consciousness of this other world's facts. Knowing that that is the state of the soul, that is how the soul is seeking to fulfill its own destiny, they take all this into consideration. Well, so far as the soul is concerned, eventually it finds an opportunity born. Now, I must not leave you with this idea that all these past impressions are absolutely compelling and we are just tool in the hands of the past and we cannot do anything further. No, it is just like what we see here. Suppose I am born with certain wrong habits or wrong tendencies, but I also have good ideas and good habits and good tendencies. And what do? If I have good sense, then I am very cautious about my wrong tendencies. I keep a careful watch upon them and gradually try to weaken them and get rid of them. And I have to strengthen these good tendencies. And all that is said is that we inherit from our past good and bad tendencies. But when we are born, it is the duty of the parents first, of the teachers next, and of our neighbors in general, of the whole country, all humanity in general, to give opportunity to me, the newborn child and the person who has entered into this worldly existence again, that my good things can be stimulated quickly and much stronger than the bad tendencies. And that's the responsibility of a family, responsibility of school and colleges, the responsibility of the community. A community which takes this fact into consideration is naturally of a higher nature than a community where it only provides opportunities for self-gratification. So when these strong tendencies are further strengthened, good tendencies are strengthened in me, you find as I grow up and bad tendencies raise their head, I am able to fight them. And so I am not altogether an instrument of my past. Past is one of the factors in my existence now, but there are other factors. As a matter of fact, those can be made predominant. And that is why they say, come in contact with good men. Education is very fine. Hearing of good things is very fine. But to come in contact with good persons is best. Because there you have the reality. And the impress of these real beings is very great on life. And our educational system therefore was that in the early years of life they were sent out of communities into the forest schools. So they would be outside worldly influences. Don't have to experience all kinds of things in this impressionable period of life, where there is serenity and where there is harmony and peace and love and self-sacrifice and austerity. And a boy had to go through it until he was 25 years old, and then only he had to return home and marry. Well, just imagine what a good citizen he would make. You might say it would be a bit unpractical. Good man's unpracticality is a wonderfully helpful thing. And a bad man's practicality is destruction. You know, if you are intelligent, you don't take long how to manage your affairs in the world. Well, in a good spirit. But if you want to be canny and wicked, then it requires many years' experience. So that we never thought it was a disability. And so then, when he comes into this life and lives this life, according to the eternal principle, next time when he is born, he does not have the same agony. Next time he goes into a still higher world, eventually enters into a spiritual world, spiritual heaven. There are some heavens which are of pure enjoyment, others which are of spiritual enjoyment. And then from that point on, attainment of illumination is not far off. Well, now, according to our belief, this is what happens after death. This is the whole cycle. Whole thing seems awfully complex, doesn't it? Many people, they find it so complex and they find it so unfortunate in many respects, full of pains and tribulations, that they cannot believe a good God will subject the soul to such a miserable history. Well, good God can be very unkind sometimes, with due apologies. The good God also created this evil world. Good God also got angry and threw our original parents out of heaven. If he had kept them there, there would not have been all this trouble afterwards. Good God has made this life so full of complexity. So what the good God does, human beings really do not know. But if human beings have to think things out, then this life, which is a segment of many lives, of the total circle of existence, it gives an inkling into the nature of this cycle. Isn't it awfully complex here? You find anything goes wrong, it has got so many reactions afterwards. You tell one lie unthinkingly, after for years and years and years and years, complexity after complexity, just because of just one lie. One wrong thing done, the whole life is blasted. Such is life. What's the use of blinking it? That's it. But it is so complex if we get caught in the wrong thing. Otherwise, it could be as simple as the child of an infant, as the smile of an infant. You see, it could be as simple as that and as innocent as that. Don't get caught in worldly things. Don't let the senses dominate you. And your whole life is simple. This earth is the simplest kind of existence. But that's not to be caught by the senses, is to be closer to one's own true nature. So it is said, if we live true to our original nature, spiritual nature, everything is simple. There is no complexity, there is no harm in being born if you have to be born again. You will be born of good parents, you will be born under propitious circumstances. Everything will be nice for you. No doubt there are many who have met very few unfortunate things and people in this life. All they have come across have been good things. Would they say that this life is really miserable, complex life? They won't say that. This art has many faces. It shows its face to us in accordance with our own state of mind. And so it is said that it is not really that bad and that complex, unless we make our life complex, unless we snarl our own existence by wrong thinking, wrongdoing, self-gratification, self-indulgences. The life is awfully simple. To be born here, to die, that death is a peaceful thing, release. To go into a deserving world where it is spiritually peaceful. To be reborn again, an enlightened, and if not, at least half enlightened soul. Where is any misery in that? So it is not right to think of this scheme as it is presented by the Hindus, of this life and the life after death, and again rebirth. This picture they give of the history of the soul. We need not always say that it is all a miserable, complex thing. No, it is not. But this is it. Responsibility is mine. Not of gods, but mine. I make what I do of my life. Nobody else does it. It is in my hands to make this life a simple, glorious thing, and it is my hands to make a hell of it, a hellish existence here. It is in my hands. And of course, the difference is also due to a simple fact. Live close to your spiritual nature, everything is wonderful. Live away from it, everything is miserable. Om Yo Shanti Antariksham Shanti Prithivi Shanti Apo Shanti Oshadhaya Shanti Vanaspataya Shanti Vishve Deva Shanti Brahma Shanti Sarvam Shanti Shanti Deva Shanti Sami Shanti Devi Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Peace is in heaven, peace is in the sky, on the earth and in the waters. The herbs, the plants and the trees are all full of peace. The gods are peaceful. Everything in the universe is pervaded by peace. May this eternal, universal peace enter our soul and being. Peace, peace, peace be unto us all.